What's up, everybody? How y'all doing? How y'all living? Tasha checking in with another video, and we are going to be doing a reaction video to none other than the series finale of the Diddy trial. Okay, if it's your first time joining me, go ahead and like this video up, comment in the comment section, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. All right, y'all. So as y'all know, as you have heard, if you haven't heard, I'm gonna let y'all know about it. Diddy has been sentenced. Okay. Did he do it? Did he didn't? I guess he did, okay? Because he has been sentenced on October 3rd. Now I'm gonna read real quick. He was sentenced to 50 months on October 3rd. Okay, he was convicted back in July of 2025. A jury found Combs guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution in violation of the Mann Act. He was acquitted of the most serious racketeering and sex trafficking charges. Okay. And so we all know that. And so fast forward, they were trying to get him out of jail until the sentencing happened. However, the judge was like, nah, he gonna stay in there until we sentence him, okay? So the judge sentenced Combs to 4 years and 2 months in federal prison, which amounts to 50 months. Combs will receive credit for the time he has already served since September 2024. So he's been locked up for a year, so they're gonna give him time served, of course, all right? Um, we about to get into this reaction video. This video was provided by Law and Crime. I love Law and Crime. They always break down the cases. So we about to get into this reaction video. Okay, as y'all can see, Diddy is ready. He's on the screen eyeballing us. But I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to share my screen with y'all, and we are gonna get into this case. We're gonna get into this case. And we're gonna talk about it. Okay. All right, y'all. Let's go into it. 1 second. Let me make sure all of the volumes are up and we are good to go. Let's do it.
Has been sentenced in his federal criminal case. We're going to discuss everything that happened inside that courtroom, including the bombshell decision by the judge. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Today was the day. After 2 years from when Cassie Ventura Fine filed her lawsuit against Sean Combs, after an investigation, after a raid, after the Cassie tape was published by CNN, after an apology video, after an arrest, after multiple indictments, superseding indictments, after an 8-week trial over the summer, where Sean Diddy Combs was acquitted of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, namely transporting people across state and international lines for sex work, he was sentenced for his crimes today. Judge Arun Subramanian in federal court in downtown Lower Manhattan sentenced the rap mogul. Just handed down the sentence a few minutes ago at the time of this recording. Now, to be clear, why this is such a big deal, other than the fact that Sean Combs has been sentenced for federal sex crimes, we had no idea what the actual sentence will be. There is no pro forma mandatory sentence here, like a life in prison. It's just a standard. We know what's going to happen. No, there was a range for this judge. The defense was asking for no more than 14 months in prison. And since Sean Combs had already served about 13 months in the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, he essentially would be out in no time if that was the case. The prosecution was asking for 11 years.
Now listen, y'all see these photos, and these sketch artists are always intriguing to me because they do such a good job at this cartoon visual, because y'all already know with this case, no cameras could be inside of the courtroom. And so the state was asking for 11 years, okay? But they did not get that. And y'all already know, y'all see how Diddy looked like an old man, right? Because he's inside the prison and he don't have access to all of the permanent dyes and things like that that he can, use to, make him look like what we see, okay? And so the real him is coming out, and he was grayed out. I was like, who is that old man? But let's get him back into it, okay?
The probation department that did its own analysis recommended 7 years and 3 months. There was a range. We did not know what the sentence would be. We are going to get into everything that happened today, including what it was like in that courtroom when the sentence was handed down. And to do that, I want to bring back on Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth Milner, Long Crime Zone. She was inside that courtroom, not only for today, for every day of this trial. This is the conclusion of quite a...
Now I'm gonna say this: Elizabeth Milner is the bomb.com. I actually, if y'all don't know, I followed this case and I have the videos up on my channel. If y'all want to go back and watch them, I followed the case and I got all of my information, most of my information, the inside scoop from Elizabeth Milner from Sidebar because she was inside of the courtroom the whole entire time. But she does do a good job at painting a visual and giving an in-depth look of what's going on inside the courtroom.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on. First, I want to start off, how did Sean Combs look? Okay, that was a big question. I know we have courtroom sketches that came out. How did he look? How did he appear? What was his demeanor? We'll talk about the statement he made in court, but just how did he look?
Yeah, well, Jesse, you can imagine how big of today actually was for Sean Combs. I mean, he was going to be learning his fate. And to your point in your intro earlier, we didn't know where that range would really lie. Could it be on the tail end of that being time served and he could possibly leave walking out of the doors? We didn't know if that was going to happen. We didn't know if he was possibly going to get done.
Now, I think that's what they were thinking. They were trying to get time served because he already did a year. I think that he was also thinking that. And in my mind, like he said, nobody really knew what he was going to get as far as sentencing, right? Because the two crimes that he was committed of carry a weight of 10 years apiece. And so what we were thinking, or what I was thinking, was that he was going to get time served, he was going to pay a fine, and then he was going to walk out of the courtroom, right? Nobody really knew it was kind of up in the air. So when this sentence was passed down, even though it was very light in comparison to what he could have got, it still was a pretty lengthy, chunky one that no one was really expecting.
Double-digit sentence. So I think the weight of the world you could kind of feel when he walked inside the courtroom today. He was wearing casual clothes, civilian clothes, so he wasn't in his MDC tan jumpsuit or anything like that, like he was at the last hearing that happened just last week. But today he appeared in...
Like, look at Diddy. Oh my gosh. Even though this is a cartoon sketch, like, look at all the greatest coming in. Like, he really, really looks like somebody's grandfather in these pictures, right? Because we're used to seeing this clean cut, shaven, black hair. And so, of course, they dye their hair and do all these things. But man, I didn't expect to see all of that. Ugh.
A tan sweater, white undershirt, dark pants, similar to the looks that he was appearing in during trial. And then when he walked inside the courtroom today, Jesse, he waved at his family. He did kind of like a little prayer hands, but he did seem a little bit nervous. And I think it's possibly because they just didn't know where the sentencing would go. And so he sat at the defense table with his glasses, and then the proceedings began. But you can only imagine what was really going on in his mind as soon as he walked in, saw his family, saw the amount of people inside that courtroom, because Jesse, it was a packed house today, body to body, person to person. There was no seat left unseated today inside that courtroom.
Real quick, talk to me about that. I heard there was 30 people in the front rows that were friends and family of Sean Combs. Anybody notable?
So Jesse, today inside the courtroom, it really was a little bit of a who's who was in there. I mean, everyone from Janice Combs, Diddy's mother, Keisha Combs, Diddy's sister, Dallas Austin, who was a music producer. He was inside that courtroom today. Sean Combs' children, that being Jesse and Delilah Combs, the twins. It was Quincy Brown who was there, Justin Combs.
Like, this ain't even funny, but look at this cartoon image of him like cowering behind his hands, kind of like scared or nervous or whatever. I'm like, really, cartoon artists? Y'all really trying to be petty and funny in this point. But yeah, she's going over who was in the courtroom. His family and everybody showed up for him in this moment.
Was there? Christian Combs was there. But I think what was interesting, Jesse, and a notable guest, at least to me, was alleged victim number 3, and that being Gina Hun. She came inside the courtroom a little bit later than the rest of the family, so she wasn't seated directly beside them. She was seated kind of more towards the back of the courtroom on the defense's side. So we did see her inside that courtroom today, and I think also another notable figure that I learned through this trial was a person named Rue, and that was Ruben, who was one of Sean Combs' security guards. He was inside the overflow courtroom. He didn't make it into the main courtroom, but he was present inside the courthouse. But other notable names that were inside that courtroom today, Jesse, were LaWanda Lane, who is a good friend of Kim Porter, who's also been reportedly taking care of the twins since Sean Combs has been incarcerated. Dana Tran, who is the mother of Sean Combs' youngest daughter, Love, she was inside that courtroom. Sarah Chapman, who is Chance's mother, was inside that courtroom. Misa Hilton, who is Justin's mother, was inside that courtroom. Charlucci, who's been a fixture throughout all of the trial, throughout all of the pretrial hearings even, too. One of Sean Combs' very good friends was inside that courtroom. Karen Agnifilo, lead attorney Mark Agnifilo's wife, was there, too. And so it really was just kind of a who's who, especially of Sean Combs' family and close friends. But I will say there wasn't any huge names that we were expecting, like a possible Ye sighting or anything like that we saw inside the main courtroom.
So if you're a fan of Sidebar, then you know we cover a lot of cases here at Law and Crime. And you might be wondering, how are we able to share so many clips with our followers from inside the court? Sign up and then you upload a video. And in just a few minutes, you'll have tons of perfectly edited clips. And here at Law and Crime, our producers have used this to help us. So give it a try for yourself. Go to opus.pro/sidebar to start creating.
Sorry, yeah, I kind of skipped like he's kind of promoting because, of course, this brand, the brands, when they come in with the deals and they help you out, they want you to promote them. So I kind of skipped it a little bit.
In your own videos today. Mia wasn't there. Now, Mia had prepared a letter in support of a harsh sentence against Sean Combs. She had testified against Sean Combs, said that he sexually assaulted her. The defense had objected to her appearing in court today, to providing a statement, and in a shock, she wasn't there.
Yeah, she wasn't there at all. And it was kind of a big shocker, to your point, Jesse, that she wasn't there, because we thought that she would be inside the courtroom. And we were kind of curious who the government witnesses who would be there to give their final victim impact statements ahead of the judge giving down Sean Combs' sentencing. But today, right off the bat, Christy Slavic, who is a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor, she said Mia no longer wishes to give an impact statement. She had submitted that written statement, and that the tone of the defense letter, I think, was what really kind of changed her mind as to coming into the courtroom today. And I can only imagine probably how Mia feels specifically. She's using a pseudonym even to testify, even as she's writing letters to the court, because of just the fear that she has been getting in terms of what she believed to be backlash, either from Sean Combs or his fans, or even just the attention that that the case has brought against her too. And so I was very surprised that she didn't attend court in person today, but I can understand why, because even the judge said to Mark Agnifilo today that the tone of the defense's letter in response to Mia giving a victim impact statement was just completely inappropriate. And it was a pretty harsh letter, Jesse. I'm sure that you've already read it, but it was kind of a very harsh tone, and it was kind of similar a little bit to her cross-examination too.
Now let's talk about the prosecution. So prosecutors today, they outlined their argument in court. It echoed a lot of what their filings were in anticipation of this sentencing. What were some of the key arguments, the themes that stood out today about why they say it was justified for Sean Combs to have a lengthy sentence? Remember, they were asking for 11 years. How did they justify it today? What were the arguments they made in court?
Yeah, well, today, Christy Slavic, making the arguments on behalf of the government, she said that today is about accountability and justice. And she was talking specifically about accountability, Jesse. She was talking about the conduct that was lasting for a 15-year period. I mean, even if you go back to the superseding indictments, where it says this conduct went on from 2009 all the way to 2024, that's a long period of time. And so from the government's perspective, they really just wanted accountability from the defendant, that being Sean Combs. And then they also wanted justice, particularly for the victims. I know when we often talk about the Sean Combs case, the Diddy case, the P. Diddy case, he is the focus of this. But I think a lot of people have to remember that there were victims in this case, that being Cassie Ventura, that being Jane, that also kind of also applying to some of the charges that he was acquitted for too, where you can also bring in like Mia and Capricorn Clark and Deontay Nash. And so I think the government from their perspective was really trying to speak on behalf of all of those people. And so today.
Now, what I did not like, and I'm going to pause it right here, I did not like how they're saying that they are sentencing him on the lesser charges. But why are you bringing back up the the higher charges. He was acquitted of those, and so why are you bringing those back up? That right there made me kind of feel like, okay, why are they doing this or bringing that back up? Now I know that he was acquitted of that, but I do believe that those things played a part in his sentencing. However, he did get a small amount of sentencing. However, they still hung on to the higher charges, even though he was acquitted of that. I just don't think they should have been brought up, like talked about at all. If I'm excused of something or acquitted of something, don't bring it back up, in my opinion. But let's get back into it.
Chrissy Slavic, again, she was saying that the law requires the court to know all about the defendant and the defendant's conduct. This isn't just a case about freak-offs and hotel nights. It's about a man who did horrible things to people. He weaponized currency against victims. They were talking about that even though he was convicted just on the Mann Act charges, that it's also kind of in relation to the violence, and that the defendant didn't understand or doesn't understand how harsh his conduct was, and that his respect for the law was just something as simple as lip service. And so, yes, the government was asking for a far steeper penalty and punishment when it came to Sean Combs' sentencing. They were hoping for those double digits, and I think they were kind of opposed to the whole split the baby method, as Chrissy Slavic said today in court. And so they did want a harsher end of the sentencing today. And I think as far as the judge's concern and what his ultimate sentence would be, it kind of ended up being a kind of happy medium a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into that. And the defense.
Now, what's crazy is that, I mean, they might get into it, but what's crazy is that a lot of people were saying that this judge did not care for Diddy like that. And I believe that the judge wanted to give him a more stricter sentence, but did not do that because of the mere fact that it was rumored that he didn't really care for Diddy. However, if it was me, I don't care what people think. I'm going to, hand out the sentencing according to the law. But I think he went light on him because of what people were saying. And, it doesn't hurt that he is also a celebrity, but they might touch on it here. So let's get back into it.
Number of defense attorneys spoke. I think almost all of them. You had Xavier Donaldson, you had Brian Steele. What were some of the themes they were focusing on in terms of why Sean Combs deserves a lenient sentence, why 14 months would be appropriate?
Yeah, so right off the bat, Jason Driscoll making the arguments on behalf of the defense, because Jesse, yes, it was Jason Driscoll who spoke. It was Nicole Westmoreland who spoke, Xavier Donaldson who spoke, Mark Agnifilo, and Brian Steele. That's 5 of his, 9 defense attorneys who all spoke in court today. So as far as Jason Driscoll is concerned, he was saying that the defense says that Combs didn't make money off of.
It's crazy. 9 attorneys, like, Diddy got some money. People can barely afford one attorney.
The Mann Act convictions that he was charged. And that was kind of a big theme in terms of his argument today, and that the defense submitted 300 cases of Mann Act cases where it talked about pimps and minors being trafficked, immigrants being transported, homeless people being transported, all of that stuff. And so that was kind of the theme that was from Jason.
Homeless people being transported. So I understood that he was getting like SMEX workers from other states and other areas, but homeless people being trafficked, like, this is crazy because I followed the whole case and this is my first time hearing this. And I'm just like, homeless people, bro? That's crazy. That's interesting. For that reason, I feel like he should have probably got more time. Like, he was trafficking anybody and everybody, it seems like, that he could get. Wow.
From Driscoll's point of view, and that the defense also saying that Miss Slavic, Christy Slavic, who is one of the federal prosecutors, blamed Mr. Combs for having a drug addiction for 25 years, something that they were also talking about, how he had been addicted to drugs going back at least to 2000. And so a lot of his conduct might be not necessarily excused because of his drug addiction, but they say that might be kind of the underlying reason. And then when you get to Nicole Westmoreland, she was talking about Sean Combs' inspiration and his commitment at MDC Brooklyn, where she was talking about all of his successful businesses. She was talking about how he started a record label from the ground up. She was talking about his clothing line. She was talking about his television company, that being Revolt, and that's where she started to really kind of get emotional, where she was saying that Sean Combs spent a majority of his adult life really trying to help the Black community, really trying to give back to the community, that he isn't this large than life persona. He's just a man who makes mistakes. When it came to the other defense attorneys speaking, Brian Steele was just very.
It's crazy how this person's coming up here trying to give credit to his name, saying that he spent a large amount of his life helping the Black community. But at the same time, two things can be true at the same time. He also spent a large amount of um his life and when he got into the era of helping the Black community, hurting the Black community as well, being nasty in the Black community, um, um, causing drama and harm to the Black community. It's like you want to speak on the side where we should like look at him in a different light of the philanthropy work that he did and the help that he did, but also at the same time while he was doing that help, he had another side to him as well. And they spoke on the drug situation. I believe that, like, when you ingest anything like alcohol, drugs, spirits are attached to that, right? And so those spirits take over your mind, your body, what you would not normally do when you get under the influence of these spirits. Um, that's what ends up happening. And so I do believe that those drugs and alcohol and all of that stuff that he was on did play a part in some of his decision making. However, some of it also was inherently in him. He just had think he was invincible, that he was untouchable. And when you have a lot of money and somebody that has a God complex mindset, then this is what you end up getting, a person like Diddy and like other celebrities. But let's get back into
it. Urging of the judge to please consider that Sean Combs had had untreated trauma throughout his life. Brian Steele urged the judge to consider that Sean Combs had untreated trauma in his life, and that there have been times in Sean Combs' life, especially when he had drugs in his system, that there were times where he had flatlined and that he was trying to be a better version of himself. And I feel like, Jesse, that was really the theme of all of what the defense was saying, that these 13 months were really reflective of Sean Combs. He wants to be a better person. He wants to leave the past in the past and be a better person for the future. And so even when it came to Xavier Donaldson, he was speaking about how Sean Combs should.
But it's like, how do we know this? You know what I'm saying? Like, if your life is on the line where you might be in jail for a long period of time, of course you're gonna come off as Mother Teresa and stuff, and like you want to live this wholesome, good life, and all of a sudden you grow closer to God. And don't get me wrong, because a lot of people grow closer to God when they are in their lowest points, right? Because that's just what ends up happening. But you want us to believe now that you've changed, now that you won't do this anymore. In my heart of hearts, I believe in what I want. I would want for him to change. I really, really do. I want him to grow a relationship with Christ so that he can change him from the inside out, right? However, I do believe that if he does not take advantage of the relationship with Christ that he needs to tap into, that he would just figure out a way to, once he gets out of jail, to not end up in these situations of circumstances again. Maybe he'll be a little bit more careful next time, but only time would tell if he truly has changed his ways. But let's back into it.
Receive a just punishment. He brings up intent when he talks about Sean Combs' conviction of the Mann Act charges, and that Sean Combs isn't just a pimp, and that he was talking about his work at MDC Brooklyn, where Xavier Donaldson said, we've had assemblymen and politicians, billionaires in MDC, but nobody besides Sean Combs was there to actually help out the other detainees and the other inmates there. And then finally with Mark Agnifilo, his whole argument was that domestic violence comes with childhood trauma. So I feel like the defense was really kind of trying to pull at the heartstrings a little bit of the judge, and even possibly the public too, because this was their final say to all of the people, all of the media coverage that this case has brought attention to. And so I think at the end of the day, from the defense's perspective, they wanted everyone, including the judge, to just look at Sean Combs as a man who made terrible, terrible mistakes, and whether or not he's been punished enough for it, that was kind of what the judge had to consider today.
By the way, I think it was interesting that I think the prosecution said in response that only one of the 5 defense lawyers who spoke actually mentioned the victims. It was very much Sean Combs focused. Now, I say that because Sean Combs did something very interesting when he spoke. He mentioned the victims. We'll get to that in a second. Before we do, I wasn't in that courtroom, but I will tell you, I reading about this, I could feel the emotion that came out when Sean Combs' children provided statements. That felt like a turning point. The judge would later reference the children. Talk to us about who spoke, what they said, and what was it like in that courtroom?
Well, I think it's a moment that a lot of people were anxious to hear, not only from Sean Combs himself, but Sean Combs' children, who, I mean, we do have to admit, Jesse, they have been through a lot throughout the duration of Sean Combs' civil litigations, all the way going into his federal case, too. And so when the Combs children came up for the victim impact statements, they all came up together. They really were showing kind of a solidified, solid unit when they were up at that podium speaking in front of the judge. I will say the only exception of Sean Combs' 7 children was the fact that his 2-year-old daughter, Love, wasn't there inside the courtroom. So in terms of who was speaking, it was all of them, again, except baby Love. But Quincy spoke first. And so one thing people have to note about Quincy is that Sean Combs isn't his biological dad. Albie Shore actually is. And so, but what Quincy said when he first spoke to the judge, because he was the—
I know that you do not have to be a biological father to someone to play a role in their life and be their dad, right? But I also am just looking at Quincy like, dude, because he's been staying close to Diddy in this case, really close to him. And I haven't been there for what Diddy has poured into his life or whatever. But the thing they have in common is that, of course, Kim Porter was his mother. And so that's how he even, was in close proximity with Diddy and able to have any form of relationship with him. It just, to me, is just kind of like you were standing up for this man like he's your biological dad, even though, like I said, it doesn't have to be blood related. Maybe Diddy took care of him. Maybe he poured into his life. Maybe he did something for him. I don't know. But I'm curious to know, like, the relationship between Quincy and Albie Shore. Like, that is what I'm curious to know, because back in the day, in the 90s and stuff like that, when Kim Porter did get with Diddy, Albie Shore was not a very big fan of that, of course. And I heard that Albie Shore, like, really, really loved Kim Porter down. And so I would like to know the dynamic of that if they ever get into it. But let's get back into this.
first one up. He is also the oldest child too, is that he is our father. In front of us, he's a changed man. Week after week, we see him evolve. Our father will never do anything to jeopardize his freedom ever again. Then Justin Combs spoke next. He's the second oldest son. Justin Combs said, please give our father a second chance. This has been the toughest time he's ever been through. This time saved my father's life. I talk to my father every day. He's changed for the better. I ask you to see my father the way I do. Christian Combs was next, and Christian Combs kind of also brought kind of the personality here a little bit too, Jesse, where he says, I'm the one who people say I look the most like my pops. I studied my dad up and down. He's my superhero. He taught me to treat women with respect. So he said the past year I had to travel across the country.
Really? So what his point of him just saying is kind of wild to me. Like, he's saying that his dad taught him to treat women with respect, but your dad is on trial for sex trafficking. Your dad got acquitted of 2 of the major charges, which involved racketeering and all of this violence that came out about how he treated women and things of that nature. If I was Christian, I would have left that out of the statement. But I know he was just trying to speak from the heart, or maybe think that was going to help him. I don't know. But that was a wild statement.
To see him for 2 hours. He's changed. I see in his eyes as his twin that he's changed. Please give my family grace and please give him mercy. But really, Jesse, where the heartstrings were with the girls, and that was Jesse Combs, Chance Combs, and Delilah Combs who were speaking today. Jesse Combs, who spoke first as far as the daughters go, she broke down immediately when she got up to that podium and started speaking. She said, we aren't here to excuse his mistakes. We need him in our life. I lost my mom, her mom being Kim Porter, when I was very young. He promised to be there to keep us safe. Then Chance Combs, she had spoke, and she said that we're just his daughters, but we do need our father. When we talk, he speaks with a clear mind. He's more patient. He's thoughtful. He wants to be a better man, a better father. He's parented our 2-year-old sister from jail, and I saw glimpses of our father. Our sister deserves a father who's present to teach her how to ride a bike, to tuck her in at night before she goes to sleep, something that any kid would want. And then the final child who spoke on behalf of the family was Delilah Combs, and she said that we're scared of the thought of not having our mom and our dad in our life. She says that these are the years that we'll never get back. I know that much of the missing years hurt because we have lost our mom. We already lost so much. Please, Your Honor, give our family the chance to heal together, not as a headline, but we're trying to do better. And so I think from just like a human perspective, it was very emotional. I mean, you couldn't help but feel for the children, especially his daughters, because some of his children have lost both.
And I will say this, I can agree with that. If anything that you can feel bad about from this case is definitely the effect that his actions have had on his children. But I also say this on the flip side of that is that you have to think about that when you're out here free balling, when you're out here, living your life, acting up, being reckless, doing all type of nasty, demonic activity. It's crazy because in those moments, you don't think about what would happen to your children if this all went south, if your reckless lifestyle all went south. You don't think about that. And now, at this point, when you're about to be sentenced and the kids are speaking and everything, now you have this in your face moment where it's like, wow, all of what I've done have affected my children. Right. And so just the girls speaking probably was more emotional because, even though the media says what they says about Diddy, even though we have seen the whole case, your children is that one thing that will love you unconditionally, no matter what it is that you have gone through, what it is that you do. They look at you in a different light from everyone else. And so, yeah, let's get back into it.
Parents, but I was wondering, would their impact statement have any sway on the judge, who I believe that had already made up his mind going into sentencing? And so it was interesting just to hear just the emotional impact of what they've been through before Sean Combs was ultimately sentenced.
I think it did. I think it did have an impact on. He mentioned something about the children later on. Again, we'll get to that. We're teasing it up because it was significant what the judge said. The judge would end up referencing not only Sean Combs, but the children and the victims too. We'll get to that. All of this was coupled by something I don't think I've seen in a sentencing. There was a video, an 11-minute video that was created by the defense that was played in court. What exactly was this video?
Well, this video, to me, Jesse, I kind of thought was a little bit of a love letter to Sean Combs, whether it was to the judge, whether it was to us in the public. I was kind of curious about where the direction was going, because we did see the video prior to it being shown in court today. So I did get a glimpse of it where I saw bits and pieces of the many accomplishments Sean Combs had. And I think that's one thing that nobody can take away from him, is that he did have incredible accomplishments, such as the record label, the fashion label, the fact that he was starting charter schools in the inner city, the fact that he was trying to raise money, the fact that he was getting more black and brown people in order to vote and do their civic duty, all of that sort. And so I think in terms of just what the video was to show, is to show that this is who Sean Combs is, but there were also glimpses of what he's like as a dad. And so there were moments where we saw him and his children together, and this was all of his children, going from his oldest child going to his youngest child, that being his daughter Love. And so we really got to see what it was like for him not to be this quote unquote larger than life person, but really to see what he is like as both him during his career and him as a father. And so it was a very humanizing video. It's about 11 minutes long. It was a very interesting glimpse into his life, kind of post all of the civil litigation, of the federal case, all of that sort. And so some of the even quotes from it was, let's go, and that means to be positive. And so I think that was kind of the theme of this, was just positivity and just how positive Sean Combs has been to certain people's lives during certain moments of his life.
We got to talk about the big moment. This was the moment we were all waiting for. Sean Combs made a statement. Now, he provided a letter to the court in anticipation of this. It seems like what he said maybe echoed a lot of what he wrote in the letter. He talked about his time in the MDC. He talked about he can't change the past, but he can change the future, that he could be a force for good. He mentioned the victims. He mentioned how sorry he was. This was an important moment, though, because this is the first real opportunity he had since all of this began to substantively address the allegations, to address the charges, to address Jane, to address Cassie. This was his opportunity. He stayed silent the entire trial, as he was supposed to. He didn't take the stand. Talk to us about what he said in court today, and we weren't there. What was his tone like? How were people reacting to this? Because that wasn't captured.
Yeah, so honestly, Jesse, even right from the beginning, it was kind of a dramatic moment in a sense, because right off the bat, when the judge said, Sean Combs, I'll give you a moment, take however much time you need. And so we're all waiting for him to say the first word. Would he sit down while he's giving his impact statement? Would he stand up? We didn't know what was happening because he really took like a good minute to, I think, kind of compose himself. And then he stood up, he took a deep breath into the mic, which we did hear, which was audible, and he said right off the bat, I want to thank you for giving me a chance to speak up for myself. It's the hardest thing for me to do was to not speak about all of this. He wasn't one to be giving out TV interviews or talking about this case or anything like that. From behind bars, even prior to his incarceration, he didn't do any of that. And so it was interesting to hear, what was he going to say? Was he going to say Cassie Ventura's name? Was he going to say Jane? We didn't know. And so when he said right off the bat, you know, the hardest thing for me to do was not speak. I want to apologize again to Cassie Ventura for any pain that I caused emotionally or physically. I mean, we all kind of know where we were when that Intercontinental Hotel video from 2016 dropped on CNN, and that video was hard to kind of take out of anyone's mind. And so him saying right off at the top of his speech that he apologizes for any pain that he caused to Cassie emotionally or physically. That was kind of the first time we were hearing him say her name in that respect, because even when you go back to the apology video, he didn't say her name. As we learned through trial, it was kind of advised for him not to say her name. But and then when it came to Jane, he said, I would like to apologize to Jane, not using Jane's real name, but said, I didn't mean to hurt you. I would like to apologize to all of the victims of domestic violence too. So really, I think from the defense's perspective, I think that their whole kind of strategy in a way, Jesse, was kind of get in front of the whole domestic violence aspect, something that I think that they knew the judge would take into consideration eventually when he would sentence him. And so even when Sean Combs was speaking, he said, it'll always be a burden that I'll have to carry. My actions were shameful and disgusting. I was out of control. I needed help. I didn't get the help. He said, I got lost in my journey of life. I'm not this larger than life person. I got lost in the excess. I got lost in my ego. I lost all of my businesses, my career, my reputation. I lost myself. My self-respect. I've been humble. I hate myself right now. I've been stripped down to nothing. But I think one big thing, Jesse, one notable thing that he was really kind of getting choked up on his words when he was giving his speech is when he stood up, or he was already standing up when he was giving his impact statement. But when he turned around to his family, specifically his children, he was getting very choked up. He said, I failed y'all as a father. You deserve better. Even though talking to his mother, where he said, to my mother, I failed you as a son. I'm sorry. He said, I failed my community. I wanted to be a shining example of what people could do, what we could do.
You know, that's kind of crazy that he would address his mom and say that he failed her as a son, because as we have heard throughout this case, his mom used to party and freak off like him back in the day, okay? And if she used to do them little parties at her house or however it went, I don't know, I wasn't there. I'm pretty sure, excuse me, that Diddy did see some things. And if anything, I'm not saying to blame her for his actions, but this is where I always talk about parenting. Parenting is so important from a young age, because that is going to raise the individual that's going to grow into the adult version of themselves that you're going to encounter. And so when you as parents do not take on that responsibility, take it seriously, you end up getting products of your raising most times. Now, sometimes the child may go on their way. They may come out of your reckless parenting. Excuse me. They may come out of your reckless parenting, and they may be different than what you raised them. But most oftentimes, when you are a bad parent, or when you are not raising the child in the way that they should be raised, I mean, it plays a part when they get older. And a lot of times people are going to want to say, well, he's in his 50s. He should know better. Yes, I agree. Not excusing him for the lifestyle that he led. He chose to do all of these things. But I do think having the lack of parental guidance, you know, his father died when he was young, and the mom probably did the best that she could. But if she rewinds it and look back at raising him, I think that she would agree that some things that was done was probably not in the best interest of him, which would cause issues in the long run.
If given a chance, another chance, he wanted to explain to the judge that people can change. And even towards the end of his speech, Jesse, he was saying, I thank the jury for my acquittal, but he still says, I take my Mann Act convictions very seriously. I want you to make an example of what a person can do if they're given another chance, because from the government's perspective, they were hoping that the judge would kind of make a case out of Sean Combs, especially given his wealth, especially given his clout, and the fact that the government alleged that his conduct had been going on for such a long amount of time. And so what Sean Combs said in response to that was, I would never jeopardize being away from my family, no matter what anyone says. And I think that was kind of a little snide to the government there. He says, no matter what anyone says, I'm truly sorry. And so it felt apologetic. It did feel, to your point, Jesse, a little repetitive of the letter that he had already sent to the judge. And
he's saying things out of his mouth that sound good. You know what I'm saying? He's saying that he would never do anything to be away from his children. But sir, when you were in them parties and you were doing reckless behavior, that was away from your children. And he had to work, and celebrities got to work, and they got to do things. And we already know that some of these kids be having nannies, and the grandmas raise them and different things like that. And the parents pop in at certain points, maybe photo ops for Instagram, and they pop in at other points, because they're on the road or they're actor, actress, singer, whatever. The thing is, though, when you sign up for this lifestyle and you end up having children, you have to know that you're not always going to be 100% in your children's life. Because shoot, regular smuggler people don't always be 100%. So imagine you having to share your stardom, your celebrity status with you between your children and with the public. You're not always going to be there. And then when you pile on, you want to do these freaky, deaky nights and stuff like that. You took yourself away from your children. This didn't even have to happen. I'm sure that your children already felt like they did not have your presence as much as they wanted to.
Honestly, Jesse, it felt kind of a little similar to the apology video after the Intercontinental Hotel video had dropped too, but it seemed like he was remorseful for his actions.
That's really interesting you say that, because look, from a legal point of view, I thought it was significant that he mentioned the victims. At first, I thought he was trying to apologize for everything in a way where he wasn't directly admitting to his convictions. But he did say at the end, I take responsibility for my Mann Act convictions. I thought he might not say that directly. Like, he didn't say, I'm sorry I transported these women across state lines for the purposes of sex work. He wasn't that specific. But the fact that he did apologize for the Mann Act convictions, I thought was significant, considering some would say, oh, he may not want to jeopardize his appeal. He may not want to admit fully that he committed these crimes. But he did, in a sense. The question I had was, and you tell me, did it seem genuine? Because reading it, it felt like he was very remorseful, and him saying that he doesn't want to be made an example of about what he did, but make an example of me about what I can do, given a second chance. It felt remorseful to me. It felt credible, but I wasn't in the courtroom. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, I think kind of from the defense's perspective, it really was kind of pulling at the heartstrings to really kind of bring out the tears in a sense. So to me, it did feel a little bit that he was remorseful, but at the same time, it did also feel like this was just everything that had already been said in the many of court filings that were already submitted to the judge. And then I felt like it felt a little disingenuous at times in terms of just the language that was used, because it was so similar to not only just the letter, but to the apology video too. And so I felt like the tone was to reach for just the heartstrings. So I felt like overall, Jesse, I think he was remorseful, but I don't know if it was remorse because of his actions and the pain that he's caused to people, or it's because he's been sitting in a jail cell for the last 12 months.
Well, then we came to the judge. Judge Arun Subramanian.
And that's what I'm thinking as well, too. What she just said, is it remorseful because he's really sorry? Because if he never got caught, would he feel bad about what he did? I'm thinking he's just more remorseful now because, like she said, he's been sitting in the jail. And so now he feels away. He's probably thinking clearly in a clear head because he's not on the drugs. And not even that, I just think that he just wants to go home and get out. And who wouldn't? So you're just going to say what you need to say so that can happen, though.
Ian, took a 5-minute break. It was interesting because we were doing our live coverage, which, by the way, oh boy, I was hosting for 7 hours straight. So we get to the judge's decision. Takes a 5-minute break, which, by the way, our guest Serena Townsend had said, hey, listen, and I was asking, does any of this affect the judge's decision? In other words, does the judge just come in there, know what he's going to do? Is he persuaded by anything that anybody says in court? Like, well, if they take a break, they go back, they may change their sentence. 5-minute break. I was like, oh, does that mean that he changed his sentence? Comes back, delivers this sentence, and it felt a little bit like a roller coaster. You kind of got an idea of where he was going and then not. And talk to us about how he started, what he said, and what the ultimate verdict was. And then we can get into a little bit about what the impact was in court, how people reacted to it. But what did the judge say exactly regarding the sentence?
Yeah, to your
All right, so I want to get into what he said, but I also want to get into some of these TikTok videos that I have found on TikTok. But I'm going to read to you all basically, of course, he got sentenced to 50 months. He already served a year, so they're going to take that into consideration. And we already know, when you get locked up, if you have good behavior, you possibly can get out earlier. So I'm thinking he's probably looking at like 2 years max at best. Okay. But also with that, he has to be on 5 years when he's released. The notes that I have says the sentence also includes 5 years of supervised release and a $500,000 fine. So he has to still pay $500,000 fine and have supervised release visits, I guess, maybe be on probation and all of those things. We're gonna listen to a little bit more of it, then we're gonna get into a few
point, Jesse, it really was like a roller coaster because I didn't know where he was going, because he was starting by saying, I consider that you are an artist and a businessman and your work history are celebrated. And he used the words that Sean Combs' work history was also iconic. He says it's impressive given the early death of your father. Your work with inner city kids is commendable. There's no doubt that you are devoted to your family. So I think when he was saying those words, Jesse, I think he was really specifically talking about those impact letters, and also seeing that 11-minute video about just all the extensive work that Sean Combs has done throughout his life outside of this federal case. And so the judge saying there's no doubt that you're devoted to your family, but the court knows that you do have problems with addiction, that drugs may have exacerbated your conduct over the years. So this was a moment where I was thinking, oh, well, maybe he'll be a little lighter on the sentence. That's what I was thinking. But then the judge said the court rejects the defense narrative of the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that this was just comes with the lifestyle of being an artist, a musician, a producer. The judge said you abused power and control over women who loved you. You used that abuse to get away, and the evidence of abuse in connection to freak-offs and hotel nights is massive. We saw the gashes and the bruises and the broken doors, and this is specifically talking about what Cassie had gone through throughout her, Cassie and Jane in that respect, throughout their relationships with Sean Combs, and that the judge said Jane and Cassie thought about both ending their lives, that these were very serious offenses. You plied Cassie with drugs. Your conduct went over for more than a decade. You were no John, but you were just more than that. And so then the judge is telling Sean Combs, well, you said you're sorry. One thing that strikes me is you brutally assaulted Jane. You punched, kicked her, slapped her so hard that she fell down. But I think when people think of this particular instance, well, the defense and the government say that this was one instance of physical violence when it came to Jane specifically. I think it's notable the timing of when this had happened. This had happened in June of 2024, just last year, but also notably after Cassie's lawsuit. This was after his homes were raided. This was after the video of him assaulting Cassie had leaked to CNN. And the judge said that even after he had physically assaulted Jane during this June 2024 incident, that he had said, and this was going by the court transcript, take this effing pill. You aren't going to ruin my effing night. You asked her also, is this coercive? And so I think from the judge's perspective, that was kind of a clear sign that the conduct has still been going on just pretty quickly or pretty recently. And so the judge also said these acts of sexual violence, substantial sentence must be given. So I was thinking maybe he would agree with the prosecution, possibly go for that 135 months. But he says that's he said, while that's more than necessary, he said it's also not reasonable. And he said that the government's proposal doesn't take into consideration the mitigating factors, where it was the opposite for the defense, where the defense's proposal of pretty much being time served was that didn't take into consideration the aggravating factors. So that would be the violence and all of that. And so the judge said at the end, the defense's proposal is insufficient. And so he handed down that sentence of 50 months of incarceration. And the judge noted it's hard time in prison, but you will have a life after this. And so towards the end of his statement, the judge really.
And I agree. I mean, listen, I don't think, well, for me, any day in jail is hard time, right? But if we're thinking about people who may have like 25 years, 30 years, and possibly even life, if you ask them, is 50 months hard time? They'd probably be like, no, I would trade my 25 or life for the 50 months, And so I don't think it's necessarily hard time, but I guess, with him being who he is, maybe that's hard time, because most of these celebrities, when they do face some type of legal issues, some of them be getting these little, baby sentences and things like that. But I also think that is one of those celebrities too that got a baby sentence, like, because when he does good behavior and they factor in time already served and everything like that, I mean, I'm thinking he's gonna be out in 2.
Really spoke to the victims, because I think honestly, Jesse, that's something that gets really lost within this case is Cassie Ventura and Jane, and he was commending him, he being the judge, commending them for speaking out and giving a voice to survivors. He said to Miss Ventura, we heard you. Mr. Combs will never be able to wash it away. And then speaking back to Cassie and the victims, says that your families are proud of you. I am proud of you. You're speaking to the millions who didn't have a voice. Violence behind closed doors doesn't have to stay hidden forever. I know you bear the trauma of what happened. Even though you were a victim, you don't have to be. And so towards the end, the judge said, Mr. Combs, these crimes were serious. And he read bits and pieces of Cassie Ventura's letter to the judge. And he did say kind of maybe some comforting words to Sean Combs and his family, where it says, you and your family will get through this. I'm counting on you to make the most of your second chance. And then immediately after, he adjourned the court for the day, and then Sean Combs was eventually taken away. But Jesse, the reaction, I think a lot of people were surprised.
Yeah, and that idea of a second chance, it may not be the second chance that Sean Combs was advocating for or hoping for, but in light of what he could have been facing, it really is a second chance. I thought it was quite notable of the judge to address the victims in this case, because there are people who could interpret this and say,
all right, y'all, we are going to pause. If y'all want to watch the remainder of that video, we only had like a little bit left of it. But if you do want to get into the last parts of it, you can go on the Law and Crime YouTube site. They do what's called Sidebar, and you can look at their takeaways in the last few minutes. And so I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to share my screen again for these little TikTok videos that I have found that is quite interesting with what some people may have said on the good old TikTok. Let's see what they're talking about, and then we are going to get out of here. I'm going to share my screen because TikTok sometimes be a little funny, but let's see what some of these people had to say.
Diddy judge must be a G-Unit fan because he just gave him 50 months. Diddy judge must be a G-Unit fan because he just gave him 50 months. Now listen, we know Diddy got 13 months in. So the judge said 50 months, that's about 4 years, okay? 4 years, that's not bad, okay? 4 years is some change. He got 13 months in. I say in about a year and a half, 2 years with programming, he'll goddamn, you know what I'm saying, be on his way to a halfway house. Now, as far as what you have scheduled next week, Diddy, put that on the back burner, brother. You got to go back into chain gang. Now listen, this is way less than what prosecution asks. And honestly, I mean, coming home today was his best outcome. 4 years, bro, that's not bad. You got 13 months in. Hey, listen, lock in a car and goddamn ride it out, Diddy. You know what I mean?
All right, so I apologize for for some of the cussing and everything like that, but
If you've been to jail, you know exactly what I mean. Then he got to do some time, okay? Not as bad as what they was trying to push for, but hey, listen. At least now he get to go down state. It's federal time, so it's going to be a little bit easier than state time because you get around people who probably in there because they've been getting a little bit of money on. It's a little bit more civilized. Prayers go out to him and his family. Diddy, listen. Do it on your head, baby boy. All right? This concludes the Diddy Thon, okay? I'm just the messenger.
So one of the comments over here says that Trump gonna get Diddy out, and I think a lot of people was kind of thinking that Trump was gonna come by and get Diddy out, and Trump did go and say that he had to look at the facts and everything to pardon Diddy. Diddy did ask him for a pardon. I don't think it's going to happen. In all honesty, I don't think it's going to happen. Let's see what one more person has to say about it. It's going to load up. I know it be slow a little
So
bit.
Diddy had a problem. He was just sentenced to 50 months in prison, which is around 4 years. Now, the problem isn't the time he was sentenced for. The problem is how he was sentenced. Because see, the thing is, Diddy and his lawyers thought he had a really good chance of going home today. Why, you ask? Well, because what he was charged for was transporting professional Netflix watchers, if you don't know what that means, look in the comments, across state lines. And nobody really goes to jail for that charge. So Diddy and his lawyers thinking, okay, we good, right? The judge said, now who said you good? And here's where Diddy's problems begin. Because even though people don't go to jail for what Diddy did, you still can go to jail. In Diddy's case, up to 22 years. But it's up to a judge to decide what's a reasonable amount of time. Now, in this judge's case, he sat there through the whole trial, listening to Diddy admit to crime after crime after crime, like domestic violence, amongst other things, because Diddy wasn't charged for these things. So, just admitting to crimes. The judge sitting there like, Diddy's lawyer said, but he wasn't charged for the big stuff. Am I right, Judge? The judge said, no, we just talking sentencing. Boom, it's time for sentencing. Diddy's lawyer said, look, Judge, you decide what's reasonable. Nobody gets charged for these sorts of crimes. Diddy already served 14 months. Let's just let him go. The judge said, okay. Prosecutor said, Diddy admitted to a lot of crimes. You sat here, you heard it yourself. How about we give him 11 years? The judge said, okay. Diddy's lawyer said, now hold on. You laughed at me and you nodded at him. Those were two different okays. The judge said, Diddy's lawyer said, oh, it's time to spice things up a bit. Diddy's family. Diddy and his family crying in the courtroom, pleading for less time. The judge said, he was not moved. Now, something I forgot to tell you is the first sentencing meeting, they do something called sentencing guidelines, basically saying the rules of the time that we're going to give Diddy. So the rules are he's not going to get 11 years. He's not going to get 0 years. Maximum, we talking 5 to 6 years. The next meeting, they do the actual sentencing where the judge begins to cuss Diddy out. Basically saying, out of all the crimes you admitted to doing for decades, you think I'm going to just let you walk out of here for free? Boy, you gotta see some time. The judge continues on to say, because of your power and resources, you probably would have kept going. So the judge says 4 years, but you did your little time served, so you're gonna be in jail for 3 years. Diddy breaks down. Diddy's lawyers get pissed, saying, you basically a 13th juror. You not being fair, judge, all that. The judge said, yeah. Diddy got a problem, tell him to call me on the jail phone. I'm out. And at the end of everything, Diddy's lawyers did say that they are going to appeal the judge's decision. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, it seems like the judge was well within his rights to grant Diddy the time that he granted him. So they probably won't win the appeal, and Diddy's going to serve some time. So Diddy had a problem. He was just saying.
So that's another, I like his perspective. Basically, he summed up everything we watched in like his comical short clip, right? But I agree, like, y'all act like he got some extreme serious time. Like, I just say, look, take the 3 years on the chin and just do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then he gonna be up in there, good behavior. They probably gonna let him out for 2. You know what I'm saying? So just take it on the chin and just do what you gotta do. Serve time. I mean, in all honesty, like someone put in The last video we watched, Comments, in my opinion, he didn't get enough time for the crimes he committed. And I agree. We have to think about that. Diddy has been doing criminal activity in the rumor mill, right, for a long time. Like there's been a lot of rumors saying that he was connected to Biggie's death, even Tupac's death, like just a lot. He been out here wilding, right? And so for you to think that, oh, we're going to appeal this, we're going to, and then, again, they're his lawyers. And so they're going to do what they need to do to make sure that their client tries to get off. They're going to, try to do what they need to do. But with their appeal backfires on them and he still has to stay in there and maybe even longer, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. All I'm saying is that, Diddy, you just going to have to take it on the chin, deal with what it is that you got, and look at the blessing in it. I mean, it could have been worse. Okay. Could have been worse. Could have been worse, in my opinion. Okay. But that's all I got for y'all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because you could go down a TikTok rabbit hole with everybody thought what they think about what happened, what could have happened, what should have happened, and all of that. However, this season in Diddy's life is over. Okay, this was the series finale. He has been given 50 months in the good old prison, okay, which isn't good old, but 50 months in prison, a $500,000 fine, and when he gets out, he has to be supervised, okay? So life can still be lived after this, Diddy. I mean, Diddy is what, like 55, 56, something like that, 54, something years old. So when you get out, you're probably going to be like maybe 57, 58, who knows, right? But you can still have some form of life. I don't think that anyone is going to want to work with him in the Hollywood industry after this. He may go ahead and focus on his sons and try to get their careers off and things like that. But we will see, because Hollywood is weird. And so they may very well pick back up and start working with him. We will see if he learned his lesson. In this instance, he may just say, okay, well, I learned how to properly do some things. Maybe I won't do things the way I did them. We shall see. We don't know. My prayer is that he is a changed person. I really do hope and pray that this time that he has to sit down, that he will be a changed individual, that he will leave that reckless lifestyle behind, that he will find Christ in prison, like all of those good things, right, for Diddy. Because there is never anything that you've done in your life. There's never a hole that you have been dropped down to so far that Jesus cannot reach down and pick you up. And so Diddy is not exempt from that. But the bottom line is that he's going to have to sit down for a little bit, think about his consequences. And in that time, I'm hoping that he grows this relationship with Christ in the way that he needs to, and that he very well will, come out of all of the craziness that he had going on. I really hope that he doesn't go back to the drugs, the alcohol that he pours into his children's lives, that this is just a marker in history that he's had to deal with. All of the past things that he's done, I hope that he, doesn't go back to those things, that really, Jesus is the only one that can forgive him for all of the past, throw it under the rug, no matter what people think. There is not rumor, but he does have some things set up in prison as far as interviews and things like that. So I guess he's going to do some interviews with some maybe podcast magazines, I don't know, and he's going to be putting those out. I'm thinking it's just so he can stay relevant and give us something further to talk about. But I did hear that he is going to be doing some interviews. And so I say this is a series finale, but it's probably the series finale of the whole court cases that went on for 2 months. But I believe that there's still going to be other things that come out about Diddy. And I'm going to keep my ears to the streets and I'm going to let y'all know about it, okay? If you like this video, you like this live, go ahead and give this a thumbs up and go ahead and leave some comments. Do you think that the time that Diddy was given from the judge was significant, did suffice for his crimes? Do you think that it was too less? Was it too much? What do y'all think? Drop it in the comments. Let's get the conversation popping. Let's get the chat popping. Also, remember to most importantly subscribe to the Redefine Me channel. Shout out to all my new subscribers. Thank you all for rocking with me. And we are going to keep this train rolling. I'm going to put out more reaction videos, and we are going to get in the flow and the vibe of these reaction videos. My goal is to kind of do them on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we get into a flow of just various reaction videos and see what y'all think about it. Okay. All right, y'all. So make sure y'all subscribe to the channel, and also, share the videos out. Just show the support in any ways that you can. Okay. I love y'all so much. May y'all have a happy and blessed Tuesday until we meet again. Bye.